Welcome to Hockey Night in New York, where Islanders hockey is always top shelf. Whether you got your start as a Dynasty veteran, a Millbury survivor, or you were born into the Church of Trotz, Hockey Night in New York is your home for all things Isles. Now, here are your eclectic hosts, Sean Cuthbert and Christian Arnold.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Hockey Night in New York. Welcome to the program, everyone, and welcome to 2022. Got another big show coming up for you tonight. Coming at you live from the Hockey Night New York studios on Long Island. Got Ethan Sears from New York Post joining us to talk Isles. My name is Sean Cuthbert, and with me, as always, is Christian Arnold. Christian, how are you?
I'm doing good, Shawnee. Happy New Year, bud.
And a Happy New Year to you.
All right. Well, now that we got that out of the way, I hope everyone enjoyed the
How was
game
the
of
holidays,
Islanders
bud?
hockey. It was good. It was
Yeah?
good. How was yours?
They were quiet,
Low-key?
but low-key.
Seems like everyone had a low-key holiday this year.
But nice. Looking forward to the new year. And here we are. So, folks, I want to thank you for joining us for this late night edition of Hockey Night in New York here at twitch.tv
Hockey Night
/.
in New York After Dark.
Hockey Night NY, indeed. Want to remind everybody that we are happy to be presented by RJ Daniels American Bar and Grill, located at 279A Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center. It is the best place to catch the Isles when you can't be at the game. Head down for great food and drink specials, plenty of HD TVs, and in-game sound. Also happy to be sponsored by Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, as well as 217 Carlton Avenue in East Islip. And, of course, the brand new UBS Arena in Belmont. They are an official partner of the New York Islanders. Check out the menu at BlueLineDeli.com for all their great offerings. Also happy to be sponsored by Tide Technology, a voice-over IP company providing phone services for businesses across the country. If you're tired of dealing with long hold times and the impersonal service of companies like Spectrum, Optimum, and Verizon, give Tide Technology a call at 516-856-7800 for 3 free months of service. And, of course, thrilled to be sponsored by Oyster Bay Brewing Company, creator of the Barn Rocker Session Ale, available at 12 locations at the Islanders' brand new home in UBS Arena, and even more distributors across the country from coast to coast. You can visit the tap room at 36 Audrey Avenue in Oyster Bay 7 days a week to sample all their fantastic beverages. And remember, those of you in the chat, remember to get your questions in for the Questions Brewing segment. Christian, the schedule has been funky, man. A lot of games and then a lot of no games.
Yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed the 2 games this past week, because you won't see another one for a week and a half.
Yeah, another 11 days or so. But, hey, the Isles got a couple in this past week, finally. Played the Sabres, played the Oil. Victorious in both games. That's a 2-game winning streak. Also at home. Things are changing around here. What do you say, CA?
Yeah, I mean, this is a weird schedule. It's tough to say whether this is good or not for the Islanders right now, at least for the momentum kind of thing, because I think we were talking before the show, and at the end of the day, this might actually end up being the best thing that could happen for the Islanders with all these delays and these weeks off and everything. For all the complaints about how the Islanders had to start the season on such a lengthy road trip, and now they're going to get to spend a whole ton of time at home and practicing and all this. So certainly in that regard, it's kind of worked out for the Islanders, but certainly from the other standpoint, of a momentum standpoint, I mean, it's tough to kind of get any sort of momentum when you're playing 2 games and then you're off for a week and a half, and you're playing a game or 2 and then you're off. So, you kind of hope by the time things get rolling again that there's a little more consistency with everything that's been going on. But as of right now, it's a little funky, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, since this season started, it has just been such a bizarre season for the Islanders in particular. I mean, obviously overall throughout the league, but even for them with all the different dominoes that we've kind of talked about with this team, starting on the road and then coming home to COVID protocols and, getting guys back and losing them again and getting guys back. And they happen to be the victim of this West Coast road swing now coming up, where they just so happen to be playing Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Seattle gets lumped in there just because they're out west. Right. And they lose all these games. So, yeah, I think, to your point, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because they're starting to gain momentum here. They're 3-0-1 in their last 4. And, like we just said, you got the 2 wins in a row. And it's like, hey, let's keep these guys going so that they can, keep that energy and maybe, have that carry over to the next few games. Well, that's not happening. But you still got important cogs out, like Pulock, like Nelson, like Wahlstrom, that guys, you might get back by the time they hit the ice on the 13th against the Devils. I mean, that's 11 days from now. So, I mean, you're definitely going to have Nelson and Wahlstrom back by then. And we should see Palmieri back on the ice as well if Barry allows him to come back on the ice, given what he said.
That's
his
the other
conference.
interesting thing. Certainly, it's opened up doors, and this whole stretch and all the COVID stuff that have impacted the Islanders the last couple months, and the rest of the world and the league and everything. Mm-hmm. It's opened up a lot of doors for guys that we kind of thought were maybe cast out, and it's shown a bit of a light on some guys who we kind of thought weren't going to kind of have to face the music, so to speak. Kyle Palmieri being one of them. And the fact that Barry Trotz sort of openly suggested that maybe there isn't a spot for him in the lineup once he's healthy is a certainly interesting turn of events from a standpoint of doing the right thing. I think, it's the smart move. It's the right thing to do because there's a lot of youngsters that have stepped up into the lineup for the Islanders that have really earned spots, and to see them lose their roster spot because a veteran who hasn't lived up to the potential that the Islanders need him to would be, I think that'd be kind of a blow to some of these guys. And I think it would be a blow to the team a little bit too. On the flip side, for what the Islanders are paying for Kyle Palmieri to sit on the bench and not play, I mean, that's not great either for a team that was really relying on him to fill that void of Jordan Eberle leaving in because of the expansion draft. So, again, a double-edged sword, just like the rest of this stuff. It is a very double-edged sword with how things have turned out.
Yeah, and it's just one of those remain to be seen things where, are they going to benefit from the break? We don't know. We don't know until they play those games. If they win, it was great for them. If they start losing, man, it sucks they had the break. That's the way it always goes. But look, this is where they sit right now. After this 3-0-1 streak, they're 10-12-6. As I said, 3-0-1 in their last 4, all at home. But they sit in the same place they did the last time we did this show 2 weeks ago, 8 points behind Boston, which is the team. Right now, they're chasing for a wild card, so nothing has changed. They went on a 3-0-1 streak, and they're still in the same spot. So that's what makes this so difficult, and that's why I think maybe it was that show or even just prior to that where we were kind of putting a dark cloud over the remainder of the season for this team. Because look, you go on you get points in 3 out of 4 games, and you don't gain any ground really on the team you have to chase. Now, just up until today, it was Detroit in that spot, but Boston took it over, and also they have like 4 or 5 games in hand on Detroit. So that was kind of a faux wild card, if you will, with Detroit sitting in there. So now the team that kind of belongs there right now is Boston. And that's the team, if you're going to root against anybody this season, it's going to be the Boston Bruins, because realistically, that's probably the only team that the Islanders can catch at this point, unless they just go on a wild tear, which I don't think any of us are going to expect at this point. But I got a little optimism out of Christian before we started the show, saying, hey, maybe this is something they can do. You care to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying to you, when you look at the way the season has gone and you look at how much rest and how much fresher the Islanders are going to be, it almost seems like 2020 all over again in a way that has nothing to do with the COVID. Because you look at where the Islanders were when everything happened, the season pauses. It was disastrous. They were in a bad spot. They weren't playing well. They were about to knock themselves out of a playoff spot. It was getting bad. Mm-hmm. And now you kind of look at where they are now. Mm-hmm. Same kind of situation. They had a big injury that was impacting them. They had guys that were fresh into the lineup, or they were dealing with all these different circumstances. And now the Islanders have a bit more time. These youngsters, these younger kids that have come into the lineup are really getting an opportunity to kind of trial by fire and shine, and you've seen that. Kieffer Bellows has really come along. I think a lot of people have Kieffer Bellows was almost the guy that we kind of wrote off at the beginning of the year because of everything that the Islanders had in their lineup, and he's really come about, especially during the COVID stretch where it's hard to argue against him being in the lineup every night. You've seen a lot of growth out of Oliver Wahlstrom, who's a key cog to this team now. You've seen Noah Dobson finally take the steps in the last couple weeks that the Islanders have needed him to do. And I think part of that may be because he's had time to kind of go through practice and kind of readjust. And, there's not that craziness like the Islanders had those first month and a half, 2 months of the season where they were on the road. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a ton of practice time. All of that, obviously, the COVID thing knocking so many players out of the Islanders lineup for as long as it did wasn't a help, but it certainly was a real test to a lot of these younger guys who were going to come into the lineup and try and prove themselves. And when you look back at that time, it was really, the Wallstroms and some of those fringe NHL, AHL guys and, sort of the players that you expect to take the next step that really stepped up and gave Islander fans at least a little bit of hope when they were out there, when they were getting crushed by some of these teams that they were playing. And it was ironically enough the Palmieri's, the Baileys, the the Zdeno Charas, the Scott Mayfields, these guys that were needed to pick up their play. So I think that was a huge boost and a huge realization maybe for the coaching staff of what they had and what can be brought to the lineup with the addition of some of these guys. So, I mean, if you're looking for a silver lining and why I think that there's a little bit more hope for this team now is because you have this kind of weird stretch where the Islanders can kind of regroup and get themselves together. They've had that lengthy break between their last game and then finally playing against Buffalo the other day. And, you look at how they played, and obviously it's Buffalo. I understand that. But
right.
but even playing Edmonton the other day, it's a game that the Islanders, especially going into overtime, and everyone knows how well the Islanders play in overtime and when you got to go to the shootout. And Noah Dobson steps up in a big way. So I think that you're seeing the progression of a lot of guys that the Islanders needed to see earlier in the season. It's finally coming for some of the Noah Dobson type players, and then you're seeing that expansion or that growth of some of the guys who we kind of wrote off.
Yeah, I think you're seeing these younger guys finally get some confidence out there, and maybe the coaching staff has been forced to put a little more faith in them just because they haven't had the guys that they're used to having available. But it has reflected because you look at even the minutes for these guys. Dobson now over the past maybe like 5 games or so, he's averaging 20 to 24 minutes now. I was looking at the numbers, and he's had between 20 to 24 minutes those nights. I looked at Kieffer Bellows, and the last 2 games, 16 and 18 minutes roughly. I mean, that's a lot of minutes for a young guy like him. He was, I think just before that, he had just over 7 minutes.
Right.
So Barry Trotz has finally liked what he's seen out of him. He's given him more trust, and he's been rewarded. Here's the key thing, is that these guys are taking advantage of it. And this may be maybe the first time, at least for Kieffer Bellows, where he's finally giving Barry Trotz a reason to keep him around when other guys come back. And maybe that's kind of what Trotz was alluding to with Kyle Palmieri. Because, look, we've seen Kieffer Bellows score before, but we've also seen him kind of get the whip a little bit.
Yeah.
Where, yes, he can put some points up, but he needs to be more responsible defensively. And similarly with Oliver Wahlstrom to a degree. But like you said earlier, maybe he's a guy we kind of started writing off on this team.
Yeah.
But he's finally finding a comfort level. And, look, that's usually what it comes down to with these first-round picks. I mean, any player at all, really, where they're a young guy, they're coming up through a team, you know that they have the ability. You know that they have the skill. And usually it's just putting together the game upstairs, up in their minds, getting that confidence, feeling comfortable, playing at an NHL level, and being able to hang with these guys. And I think once it clicks and they realize that they can, you start to see what these guys are able to do. And Dobson and Bellows are those 2 guys right now who are saying, hey, we can do this. Because, we've seen some flashes from Dobson as well. But one thing I know that I've said on this show previously is he's still green in the sense that he's hesitating. And he's not taking shots when he should be. He's looking past a little bit too much. And now he's starting to fire the puck. And you see that he has 5 goals now. And he's got 10 points, I believe, in his last 10 games. And that's all. And it's all showing in just the way he's carrying himself on the ice. It's such a big difference.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely true. And to your point, they're getting that confidence because they're getting the playing time because they kind of have to at this point, right? Like the Islanders were in
nothing else has been working.
Right, the Islanders were in a position A, they didn't have the bodies to do it, and you saw a lot of guys take advantage. Robin Salo, another guy that we haven't really talked about too either, stepped up in that position. Austin Czarnik, when he's been up here, that's right, has managed to fit into a role and be an offensive presence for the Islanders when they needed him. So there's a lot of guys that took advantage of that, and the guys that you expected or needed to be a part of this lineup in a big way, I think have really stepped up in the last couple of games, especially the younger games, the Bellows, the Dobsons, and I'd even put Salo in that category as well.
No doubt about it. So, folks, want to thank you all for tuning in to this late edition of Hockey Night New York here at twitch.tv/Hockey Night NY. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Ethan Sears of the New York Post will join us to talk more Islander hockey. We'll be right back.
Nikki, where should I go to watch the Islander game?
Dad, where should Fran go to watch the Islander game?
Just tell her to go to RJ Daniels.
Love the Isles? Go to RJ Daniels and enjoy your favorite hockey team with their big screen TVs and in-game sound. RJ Daniels also provides indoor and outdoor dining, catering, a vibrant late-night bar scene, and weekly live entertainment. Need great planials? Go to RJ Daniels. Call or visit online at rjdaniels.com.
From the Coliseum to UBS Arena, we're still rocking the barn.
We made a product based on something that we're big fans of.
You're going to rock the barn, you're going to have a barn rocker.
Oyster Bay Brewing Company's Barn Rocker, available at UBS Arena and everywhere beer is sold.
I don't want to hear it. It's over. I can't believe they fell short again.
Yeah, but they played so well. They made it to the semifinals 2 years in a row.
The semifinals aren't the cup. God damn it, I hate those Lightning.
They'll get another shot at it next year.
I don't even want to talk about it anymore, all right? They lost, okay? Let me just sit here and enjoy the one thing that makes me a little bit happy. This fresh, delicious, tasty, meaty, turkey-filled Blue Line Combo. I eat 3 every day to help keep me strong.
Hey, Donnie, can I have one of those?
Coming right up. Talk about a blast from the Blue Line.
Blue Line Deli and Bagels. Our goal is to make you a hero.
Let's get back to Hockey Night in New York with Sean Cuthbert and Christian Arnold.
Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for On the Line, brought to you by our friends at Tide Technology. And joining us right now from the New York Post is Mr. Ethan Sears. Ethan, you're talking to Sean and Christian. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. Welcome on board. And welcome to Islander Country. Just joining Islander Country, Islander coverage. How have you settled into the new position so far, covering these New York Islanders on Long Island?
Well, it's been an interesting transition, obviously. You get there and kind of immediately everything hits the fan a little bit. But no, it's gone good. It's been a good beat to settle in on, and the team is it's certainly been interesting.
Yeah, there's no shortage for interesting when it comes to the New York Islanders. Ethan, appreciate you coming on. It's Christian. I wanted to jump right into it with you. Obviously, you've sort of settled in now, and you've seen sort of the chaos not only on the ice, but the chaos with the fans, but with reaction to just about everything that happens there. And I'm curious to get your take and how you've seen the Islanders so far, and in particular, I guess, how you've seen this whole thing play out with the starts and the stops to the season and their kind of ability, at least in the last couple games, to really jump back into it with pretty fresh legs.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost a little bit hard to get a read on this team, right? Because the last 4 games, I would say they've played pretty well and they've looked a lot better. They've been a lot healthier. Obviously, the last 2 you mentioned, but those 4 games have come over, a 2-week period, and now there's another 2 weeks where they're not going to really pretty much do anything. And it's a little hard to know what to make of that, or whether they can keep it going afterwards. I think if they had gone on this West Coast trip, we probably would have learned a lot from it, but unfortunately, that's not happening.
Right, for sure, Ethan. And Christian and I were talking about this before you came on. And you have this kind of forced break here. They have a little momentum here with the last 4 games, 3-0-1. But also they have some guys on the men. They have some guys that they need to come back from COVID protocol. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword here. And how do you view it? Is this something, maybe if you were looking through it from the lens of an Islander supporter, is this something you would have rather seen them just pick up with these games, or maybe the break is going to serve them better? What do you think?
I think I probably would have rather seen them play. I think I probably would, or really I am anxious to kind of see what this team looks like right now that most of the guys are healthy. And like I said, I think, it would have been really interesting to see, okay, they played well, these last 2 games, and now they would have had to go to the West Coast, play in Calgary, play in Edmonton. Those are probably some games where you learn something about this team, and then you can come back home and have maybe a little bit of a better sense of how this is going to go.
Talking with Ethan Sears from the New York Post here on the line, brought to you by our friends over at Tide Technology. And Ethan, how have you seen the Islanders play progress at UBS Arena? I think that's one thing that has really kind of been an interesting sort of topic of conversation, because the Islanders were always very good at home in the Nassau Coliseum. And this year they come into UBS Arena off the road, off a very lengthy road trip to start the season. And obviously there was COVID involved, and obviously everyone was still kind of getting their feet under them at the new building. But it certainly seemed like things were a little off, to say the least, when they got back to Long Island. And now it seems like things have shifted a little bit. Do you sense a little bit of a difference now from the team having? It seems like at the very least they got a couple wins at home, and now they seem to have been feeling that home cooking a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean they had that obviously run. They didn't win a game in the building for the first 3 weeks or so, and had a couple of losses that were just gut punches. Chicago, Nashville, but I think now they seem to have settled in, and also obviously, as you mentioned, that kind of comes or coincides with the lineup getting a little healthier, which probably is not a coincidence.
Right. For sure, Ethan. And just to pick up on another topic that Christian and I were talking about before he came on, we were talking about the emergence here, it looks like, of Noah Dobson and Kieffer Bellows, and maybe benefiting from some of these guys being out, particularly the key on Noah Dobson. Everybody's talked about how important Ryan Pulock has been to this team, particularly his pairing with Adam Pelech. But has his absence here with his injury maybe allowed for Noah Dobson to kind of come into his own and maybe seize an opportunity with such a void left by Pulock? I mean, not just on the defensive side of things, but also offensively with all the numbers that Dobson's putting up now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it forces, Dobson to do a little more, puts a little bit more on his shoulders. And you mentioned the offense. I think that's really where we've seen the biggest strides with him. Like the way he's driven play recently, even strength and on the power play has been really noticeable, right? Like Barzal's goal the other night, Dobson had, kind of a huge role in that, coming up on the rush, made a really nice pass that set up the play. And I don't know if that's necessarily something that was super noticeable in his game earlier in the year.
Ethan, we talked a lot about some of these young kids too for the start of the show, and I am curious when it comes to Bellows, when it comes to Salo, when it comes to Dobson, when it comes to Oliver Wahlstrom even. One thing that the Islanders have, or Barry Trotz, I should say, has notoriously been known for is not playing a lot of those youngsters. It seems like that because of the COVID circumstances, those guys have had to be in the lineup because there's no other choice. And I am curious to get your sense. Have you noticed sort of, at least in your dealings with Trotz, have you noticed any sort of change in sort of his demeanor or sort of his perception when it comes to wanting to keep those guys out longer, considering where Trotz may have stood even just a couple weeks ago when he seemed pretty set on keeping, the Palmieris, the Baileys, and, the et ceteras in the lineup? It seems like those days have kind of shifted away from that.
Yeah, I mean, when we've asked him about Bellows in particular, a couple times he's kind of put it in terms of street cred and saying, when you're a younger player, you kind of need to build up that credibility. And Bellows right now, the way he's playing is really doing that. And, you've seen his minutes kind of tick upwards. And as that's happened, I asked him about Palmieri the other night, and he kind of said, well, we don't know the timetable, but, when Kyle is back, we're going to maybe see whether he gets back in the lineup or not, because, as you guys know, he hasn't really been producing.
Right. And it is interesting. I mean, that was probably maybe the most surprising thing to hear out of Barry Trotz's mouth in a while was the change about Palmieri. What do you think that says about his, I guess the leash that he's giving these veterans? I mean, Palmieri is a guy that the Islanders re-signed for a pretty penny, and he was expected to do a lot. How do you think that's kind of changed, and do you think there's any sort of message now sent to the rest of the veteran lineup there?
I mean, definitely it's a message. You also saw that when Beauvillier was a healthy scratch a little bit ago, and Trotz kind of wanting to send that message. And like you look at the record and you gotta do something, right? Like,
right.
And if the guys who give you the best chance to win, if the lineup that gives you the best chance to win is Kyle Palmieri on the bench, like, I think you kind of have to look at it and say, all right, like, the contract situation be as it may, we're going to roll this out.
Right.
Because, the Islanders want to be in the playoffs this year, and they've got a long way to go if that's going to happen.
And it is interesting because now Sean and I were just talking about sort of the playoff chances, and I think, we've talked before at Islander games and stuff, and I think, my perception in up until the last couple days really has been the Islanders really have an uphill a large hill to climb to get out of this position. It doesn't seem like it's a really possible thing to do right now, but I've sort of changed my opinion. I'm curious to see where you stand on this about how all the COVID breaks have lined up for the Islanders, and do you think it kind of gives them a better chance to get themselves back into that 8th spot and sneak into the playoffs and maybe do some damage like they've done in years past?
I mean, I think I would say, is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No. Right? Like, I don't know exactly what the math is on the pace they would have to play at, but they would have to really, really, really turn this around. Certainly it helps to get guys healthier, but they're also, maybe going to have to, pay for that on the back end. They have, already a really packed January, a really packed March. Those weeks in February, you assume they're going to be able to make up a lot of these games in, but, they're going to be playing more games and less time than the rest of the league. And, that's something that could maybe, could maybe hurt them comparatively. And, as far as external factors go, they haven't really had anything go right for them this year. So they're, something's going to have to change in a big way there. Like I said, possible. Yeah. Likely. No.
Interesting. All right. Talking with Ethan Sears here from the New York Post, covers the Islanders. Ethan, also a Michigan grad, I might want to add, because it does come in line with our next question. We do have a chat going on our Twitch stream, and someone wanted to ask us about the Michigan no-show the other day against Georgia, and I feel bad bringing this up, Ethan, but we got to ask people's questions.
That's okay.
and they want to know, does the no-show game against Georgia continue questions about Harbaugh's tenure there as head coach?
No, definitely not. I think any been around the program and I covered them when I was in school, or any fan or anyone who's just been around there. I mean, the hump that they had to get over was to beat Ohio State and to win the Big Ten. And once they did that, I think everyone, kind of, at least in my orbit, was like, they're sad the other night, but no one is very upset about it. I think everybody kind of knows Georgia recruits better than Michigan. There's a bit of a ladder Michigan has to climb there, and to be in the playoff for the first time, that Ohio State win was the biggest win the program has had, and probably since they last won a national championship.
Jeez.
So I would say Jim is on pretty safe ground right now.
Ethan, I agree with you 1,000%. I watched the game. No, I didn't. I didn't watch the game. I don't watch college football at all. That was our college football hour here on Hockey Night in New York. But to reel it back into the Islanders, Semyon Varlamov got the start against the Sabres, and he looked really good playing against them. And it seems like he's kind of getting back to form. It looked like when he finally got back into the lineup after that season-starting injury, where he was a little slow to get back to his form, get back to his pace. It looks like he's getting closer and closer. And it's funny, it seems just like every week we're talking about, well, where's the goaltending going now? What's happening now? Is Sorokin the new starter? And seeing Varlamov kind of settle in here, do you think maybe we go back to a 50-50 split between these two guys, or do you think maybe it's still Sorokin's net to lose, where maybe he gets more of a 60-40 split, something like that?
I would probably lean towards the second one, it being Sorokin's net to lose, just with how he's played. But also, they're once they start playing again, they're going to be playing pretty much every other day for long stretches of the season. So, maybe just because of that, you see it lean towards a more even split. And obviously Varlamov kind of getting his footing and playing well is huge for them. I don't think they can go on the kind of run that we're talking about here if they don't have two goaltenders playing well.
Talking with Ethan Sears here from the New York Post here on the line, brought to you by our friends over at Tide Technology. And Ethan, before we let all of our guests go. We tend to do this as much as we can when we can get creative anyway. We love to ask our guests a random question before we let them go. Just to give you a couple examples, your fellow colleague from the New York Post, Molly Walker, we asked her about her favorite press box snack. Andrew Gross, we asked him a ton of questions about music because, as you know, Andrew loves music. Brian Compton was asked about how terrible Kiss was because they're awful.
It's a valid question.
So, Ethan, we mentioned Michigan. I'm curious if you have a good Jim Harbaugh story from your time covering Michigan football during your years there.
Let's see. I would say Jim is not the most personable guy I've ever met. It's a little he's a little awkward. He's not one to kind of, I guess, hang around or chat with writers or anything like that. Right. He kind of does this thing during press conferences where you'll ask him something and he'll stare at you. And I remember one year they beat Iowa like 10-3, looked awful, gained like, I don't know, like 200, some terrible number of yards on offense. Yikes. And the offense had been playing badly through, the whole time. And someone asked him, like, what's going on here? What's, what needs to be fixed? And he goes like, well, we really think we're hitting our stride on offense. And the whole room just kind of like, what? Like, and it's like, well, why do you think that? And he's like, yeah, like we're hitting our stride. We're really happy with how we're playing. And that's what he's like to cover. He's kind of a little bit in his own world. And when it's going well, you can't really say anything bad about it. And when it's not going well, it can be a bit of a drag, but he's an interesting guy.
Great stuff, Ethan. Well, Ethan, want to thank you so much for joining us here tonight on Hockey Night New York and welcome you once again to covering the New York Islanders. I'm sure it'll be a fun roller coaster ride for you. And hopefully we'll have you on the show down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Seany and Christian. Appreciate it.
You got it, Ethan. Take care. That was Ethan Sears of the New York Post covering the New York Islanders. Good stuff from him and Christian. We're breaking all kinds of records tonight. Not only was Jim Harbaugh mentioned once, but twice within the same segment.
Now, do you know who Jim Harbaugh is?
Now, did he...
He's a football coach.
Coach the Giants at one point?
No,
or was
you're
the
thinking
Jets?
Jim Fossil.
Just because his name is also Jim? No,
yes.
I'm familiar with the name Jim Harbaugh, but I thought he coached in the NFL at one point.
His brother coaches in the NFL.
What's his first name?
His brother coaches for the his brother's John Harbaugh, who coaches Baltimore Ravens.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we've covered all the Harbaughs now. And
that's
Michigan
the most
football.
You've talked about college football probably in the last decade, I'd imagine.
Easily.
Yeah. No
easily the last decade, if not the last two. But we move on to Islander talk because that's why we're here.
By the way, don't want to forget to mention again, we love your questions in the chat. We want to answer them as much as we can later on in the show.
Yes.
So don't forget to get your questions brewing into the chat now. We will answer them later when we talk about it, presented by our friends from Oyster Bay.
There you go. And here we go, buddy. Jim did coach in the NFL.
Did he really?
MJ Beckman. He was a San Francisco 49ers coach.
There you go.
See?
Yeah. All right.
I know what I'm talking about. No, I
Sometimes.
don't. No, I don't. I don't, especially when it comes to football. So, Christian, do you think there's any chance...
I do remember that. I forgot about that.
Thanks, pal.
I think...
So, do you think there's any chance of the NHL trying to sneak a game in here in these 11 days that the Islanders are going to miss? Or
no, I mean, I don't think... Logistically, I don't even know how they'd manage to do that, right? Because... What? I mean, the only
one job.
Yeah, the only one I could think of maybe would be the Ranger game that got canceled.
Wasn't there a Philly one, too?
Right, but then you'd have to try and... I mean, I don't even know Philadelphia. I know the Rangers play a couple times this week alone.
Okay.
I think they play Tuesday, Thursday, or something like that. So it's not doable. The Islanders have an 11-day break, I want to say here, right? Yeah, 11 days. So another 11-day break coming up here now because of the COVID issue. But it'll be interesting because, too, you look at the Islanders' schedule and really... After they play, once they play again on the 13th, they play New Jersey, they play Washington. All these games at home, Philly, Columbus. The only Islanders road game now this month is going to be in Toronto.
Yes.
The problem is there are reports coming out of Canada now that they are looking at more COVID restrictions for the next 3-4 weeks. They're looking at more or potentially canceling ticketed events, which I would imagine would include the NHL.
Those are ticketed events.
And because the NHL is hell-bent on playing these games in front of crowds, I would imagine that if they get wind that this is going to happen and that there aren't going to be admitted fans allowed in the building, that Toronto game could also get pushed back too.
Well, I guess at least that's only one game, and it is sandwiched between a lot of home games. So at least the Isles can play those games, and then hopefully they can catch up with those other games later on. I mean, we may be looking at a full slated schedule in February now.
Right.
Like, there might not even be any break at all if the NHL can logistically sort some of these games and throw them into those 3 weeks that, you know, the NHL was supposed to be off. You might just see the Islanders with a full February, which would be good in the sense that if they manage to find a way to do that, then maybe they don't have so many games packed towards the end of the season where they're playing 3 games of 4 nights every week or whatever the case may be. If they can crunch these games into February, maybe it just looks like at least somewhat of a more normal schedule. So hopefully that's what they can do. But I mean, everything has to fall into place because things aren't going well right now in the COVID world. The numbers are getting worse.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, all these things have to go right for that to happen.
Yeah.
So it won't happen.
A lot of ins.
I can tell you then it won't.
A lot of outs. A lot of what have yous. We'll see.
And that's the problem because now even some of those February reschedules, I would imagine if the Canadian government is closing the border or if there's restrictions still on events and things like that, I would imagine the NHL isn't going to play those games because they want people in the building.
Unless they roll the dice a little bit and do what they did similar to Boston and Montreal, where they flipped the home and road, where they ended up playing a game scheduled in Montreal in Boston, and they said, hey, we'll just make up the Montreal game towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible.
Maybe they could do that too.
But again, you also have to make sure that the arena dates line up.
Of course.
Like, that's the other problem. You have to make sure that especially with these teams with two teams, concerts going on still and all that, you know, what happens with a team like using Boston, for example, you have to line up with the Celtics schedule. You have to line up with any sort of events going on at the building. So it's tough. It's tough.
Of course. Well, we'll see. I mean, here's an interesting thought too. And I don't know if this is the case now, but you remember a few days ago, everybody was posting how the NHL.com site went blank. All the standings went blank. I'm sure you saw that, right?
I heard about it, yeah.
So there was one day where that happened. And
obviously, Brian Compton fell asleep at the wheel.
Right, of course. But now, I don't know.
He was eating his McRib and dripped some sauce on it.
McRib? He was eating a B Comp Q.
He couldn't get it. It was probably late or something. He works night shifts, so they're closed.
That's fair. McDonald's would be open.
Late.
Blue Line would not because they're not 24 hours yet. Right.
Yeah. Donnie, get on that.
Get on that, Donnie. But anyway, after they fixed the site, so to speak, and they had the standings reset. Now, I don't know if this is the case or not, but I did take notice of the points percentage slot. Now, I don't remember if that was missing prior to. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But the point is, I did take notice of that, and I was like, I wonder if they just threw that in. And whether they did or not, I think it's very relevant because I have to say, Christian, I would be very surprised if all 32 teams get to 82 games now.
I'm
not sure that's going to happen.
I agree with you. I think points percentage was always going to be a factor in this year. So I don't know if it's as conspiratorial.
It might have always been there. I'm not trying to make anything out of it. It's just at the very least I took notice of that column, and I was like, oh hey, that's probably going to be relevant now.
Now also, as some people may or may not know, I did at one point work for the league and worked on the back end of those websites, the NHL website. And I can tell you, too, that also something like that could have happened easily for a number of reasons, none of which have to be...
I'm not trying to make anything out of it.
I'm trying to add some more context to it because people hear that and rightfully people are curious and skeptical of what... But I can tell you with some certain degree of certainty too that like things like that happen just because something does. There's an error on like when Amazon went down and it took down all those different websites because they all use Amazon Web Services. So then all these different websites couldn't work, right? So that could be a problem. There could have been a glitch on the back end. Someone could have clicked a button. There's like a million different things that could have gone wrong.
Of course.
That explain that. But certainly it is interesting, right? Like all of this is happening and then boom, it's gone.
Yeah. It just seemed like while all the cancellations were being made, it was almost like, all right, let's slip that in there because it might be relevant now. But again, it might have been there already. I don't remember. But point is, I saw it and I was like, yeah, that's going to play a role, I think.
Oh, 100%.
I just don't see 82 games for all teams, and I do think it's going to be imbalanced. And the Islanders are kind of the prime candidate here, where they could very well end up being a team that plays less than the rest of the league.
Yeah.
You know, because you just have so many games that they have to make up. Now, I imagine Boston must be in just about the same boat because they have the same amount of games played, and they're the only two with, 28 games or whatever the case may be.
28 games,
right?
And 28 games, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, I'm not as heavy on the pulse of the Boston Bruins as I am the Islanders, but I don't remember hearing them having as many, I suppose, game postponements or cancellations. I mean, it could have just been more a natural side of their schedule, but regardless, they both have that many games to play. Now, do Boston the question is, does Boston have as many unscheduled games as the Islanders do right now, right? The Islanders had a lot postponed. Do Boston have the same by comparison?
I don't think a lot of these games that have been postponed have been rescheduled too much yet. Like, I know there's the 2 games that the Islanders missed because of COVID. They did reschedule them earlier, those Philadelphia and Ranger games, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Philadelphia, I forget when the Philadelphia game is going to be played, but the Ranger one was moved to St. Patrick's Day.
Right, that's right. I forgot about that. Okay.
But these newer games that obviously haven't been rescheduled yet, and I don't think there's been a ton of rescheduling done by the league yet, because I would imagine with the big February hole they have now that they're working vigorously to try and put everything into that February slot now that they're not going to the Olympics.
At least in the States. Because again, is Canada going to open up by then?
Right.
I don't know. It's going to be something interesting to see. So we'll see. But again, I'd be surprised at this point if the Islanders get to 82 games. Now, whether that's...
I'd be surprised if even the Canadian teams get to 82 games. Not even just the Islanders, but you think about Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary. You know, those are teams that they've already had a ton of postponements, and I could imagine Ottawa. I could see them not getting to 82 just because you get to April or May, and you're like, all right, we either got to start the playoffs or this season's going to go longer, right? So
yeah, and our great viewers in the chat have pointed out that the Philadelphia game has not been rescheduled.
So it's just the Island. It's just the Ranger game.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Plenty remains to be seen, but let's get back onto the ice and the positive side of things here. There are some good things happening on the ice for the Islanders, as we talked about their current streak, playing better at home, kind of exercising that demon on home ice, where maybe UBS is starting to become a little more comfortable for everybody. Not only the Islanders themselves, but also the fans in the stands. It doesn't feel as foreign to me now walking to that building. a little more familiarity, which is nice. But Matt Barzal, 8-game point streak, 2 goals, 11 assists for 13, 6 of those points in the power play. The leader is leading right now. Maybe not the leader with the C, but the star of this team.
Yeah, and that's sort of what the Islanders needed that in a big way, because, like it or not, whether it's fair or not, Barzal, as much as he is a playmaker, is always going to be looked at as a goal scorer and a star on the team. And seemingly, when you look at the way the ebbs and flows of the season go, usually when Barzal's on, the Islanders are on, and when Barzal's off, the Islanders are off. And so to see him playing at the rate that he is, playing at the confidence level that he is, I think, too, having everyone back has gone a long way for a lot of these guys, because I think you had some guys that were trying to do too much. You had Barzal who was trying to, the biggest knock on Barzal now seems to be he's trying to do too much when he's out there, right? He's trying to make the perfect play, the perfect pass. He's trying to do too much, all these different things. And when he goes out and he simplifies his game, which I think you kind of see now with the way he's playing, is when he's most effective, when he's playing that smart game in his own end, and when he's able to just kind of do his thing and not overthink things, is when he is most comfortable. And it seems to be the way that a lot of these guys play, right? Oliver Wahlstrom is the same way. Bellows seems to be the same way. The power play is the same way.
The power play.
So you look at a lot of these things, and when everyone slows down and simplifies their game is when everyone's the most successful, because you've always seen the Islanders as a whole, the biggest knock is always that they're trying to do too much sometimes. They're trying to be too cute. And I think you're seeing kind of the opposite now in the last couple games.
No, absolutely. And look no further than the leader with the C, Anders Lee. 6 goals, 2 assists in his last 8 games played. 3 of those goals on the power play, 6 of those points on the power play, which is great because their first line is going, regardless of who's on the other side. Josh Bailey, though, he does have a couple of assists in the last few games, so he's coming around a little bit. He's playing better. Absolutely. So, look, things are kind of starting to hit their stride a little bit. Again, you wonder if this now lack of games coming up here is going to hinder that, or if they're going to be able to pick up where they left off. Now, if you want to look at the Buffalo game coming back after a little break there, they were a shot out of a cannon. They were ready to go. They played well against the Sabres, as you said. Maybe the Sabres aren't the most formidable opponent.
Right. But Edmonton's
But they had a strong game. Yeah. And Edmonton's a good team, too. And that was a battle. And it's interesting. That Edmonton game, a lot of these games have been so similar, but except the end to the script now has been changing. Instead of them losing these games, they're either getting a point or two. So it's trending in a good direction. They're playing better against these teams. They had a great third period against Edmonton. I think they only gave up 2 shots on goal. They end up outshooting them by 10 for the game. And they finally exercised their overtime demon by getting a win there. So, again, things are trending, even if it's a little slowly, in that right direction.
You're seeing them. You know how we talked about, I think it was, 2 shows ago now? Maybe last show about the Islanders.
8 months ago.
Yeah, right. It's so hard to keep track these days. About the Islanders not looking comfortable in those uncomfortable spots.
Right.
Seems like they're getting back to that special sauce or whatever it was that they're playing in those tight games, and now they're more comfortable. There's not that panic that we saw earlier in the season. It's much more controlled. It's much more fight in this team. It doesn't seem as chaotic as we've seen in those first month or so of the season, where when the Islanders fall behind, or even when they were trying to claw back and they would kind of get in their own way, it seemed, you just sensed that they felt like something was going to happen.
Right.
That was going to impact them in a negative way.
I'm with you. And Anthony Beauvillier, he has 2 goals in his last 3 games, so he's woken up a little bit. He had that benching, obviously, not too long ago. So, again, things are improving a little bit by bit here. So, look, at the very least, we want this team to at least give fans something to watch for, right? Something to get excited about. And we talk about maybe having a chance now to get back in the playoff race. Keep that going. And hopefully games are still meaningful through January, February, March. And maybe, they get a little more magic and they sneak into that last wild card spot. But it's good. Things are trending in a good direction.
Could be wild if that St. Patrick's Day game, Islanders-Rangers, has a lot of implications at that point in the season, right? That could be a very interesting evening at Madison Square Garden.
Yes, no question about it, especially on St. Patrick's Day. And very quickly, you mentioned the power play. Might as well mention the fact that, hey, it's up to 17th overall.
Which is
middle of the pack, 32-team league here. That's middle of the pack.
Which for the Islanders is a huge improvement.
They haven't been there in a long time. 18.7%. They've gone 1 for 2 in at least their last 2 games. But even prior to that, the power play, not only has it been producing, but it's actually looked better. Even on their failed power play last night against Edmonton, they looked great.
Yeah.
And it was chance after chance. They came really close to putting one on that second power play as well. They didn't, but I mean, I guess maybe it goes back to that word simplification, right? Yeah. I mean, not only simplifying the game overall, but simplifying things on the power play. We talked about this. Get pucks to the net. And you talk about the trust that they're putting into Noah Dobson and Kieffer. Bellows, he's been logging a lot of power play minutes in those gain minutes that he's been getting. So, again, getting a lot of trust. Maybe, again, it's by default because, look, Brock Nelson's out. He's a power play guy. Yeah. Oliver Wahlstrom, he's a power play guy. But Bellows is seizing the opportunity. He's making something out of it. He's putting points up on the power play. He's showing that maybe he belongs.
You know what's interesting, too, which we didn't even talk about for the Edmonton game.
Did I say that? I hope not. Oh, no, I get it. Norris Trophy.
Yes,
A little quick there, Mel. I love the spirit, but I wouldn't say so just yet.
Who was that? Donnie, too. What was he talking about? Matthew? Oh, he was talking about Ilya Sorokin being the best goaltender in the NHL.
Yeah, he's got to pump the brakes a little bit. He's a very good goalie, but he's not there yet. Yeah. Maybe one day.
He's a good goalie. Not there yet.
Very good goalie.
Very good. Yes. No, but we didn't even talk about the Islanders won that game against Edmonton without Barry Trotz on the bench.
True.
And a couple of John Gruden wasn't on the bench, and I forget there was one other Islanders. Pierre Greco wasn't out there. Was in COVID protocol, but Gruden and Greco were in protocol. Barry Trotz missed the game because of personal reasons, but Lane Lambert behind the bench, certainly an interesting note to keep an eye on too. I mean, Lane Lambert, I think his name always comes up when there's coaching availabilities open. I think he interviewed for the Anaheim Ducks job a couple of years ago as well. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that I think everyone assumes every year is not going to be there with the Islanders the following year because he is such a good coach, and I am curious to see if that gets any team's attention. I mean, I understand it's a one-game sample size, but it's certainly.
I think he already has the league's attention, and I think it is
it's just another notch on the belt or on the list of why this guy it would make a great NHL coach. Yeah. I think everyone's kind of surprised that he never ended up in another team yet. There have been a ton of vacancies in the last couple of years.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, right. I mean, the Islanders have been the beneficiary of that. So
yeah, absolutely. So,
but certainly something to note. I thought too. And all of that.
Absolutely.
That was going on.
Well, how do you feel about going to What's on Tap?
Sure.
Yeah? Let's do it.
And now, it's time for What's on Tap. Brought to you by RJ Daniels, American Bar and Grill.
That's right, folks. It's time for What's on
to
Tap.
That guy?
No, I have no idea who that is. We just hired him out, and he did a great job. Did a great job.
Sounds familiar.
No idea what you're talking about. I was just doing an impression of whoever that was. So, Christian.
You mean you think someone just goes around talking with that voice the whole life?
Or it's a professional. It's just really good at making that voice. So, Christian, what's
it's a very
on tap?
Specific professional.
Yeah. So, what's on tap?
Nothing.
Nothing is on tap. Literally nothing is on tap.
Have some rest and relaxation.
Little R&R. That's all we got. I mean, there were supposed to be a couple of games this week. Actually, a few. Calgary's next week, but Seattle, Edmonton, Vancouver. That's all getting pushed back.
Well, on the bright side,
no longer on tap.
On the bright side for everybody, no one has to stay up till 10 o'clock to see a start of a game this week.
That's true. Maybe get a little extra sleep.
Everyone gets a little
R&R.
Islander fans, the team, Shawnee.
It's true. But, Christian, if we do look a little bit down the road, we may have something exciting on tap. We believe we do. Now, we are living in a wild world right now. But you talked about that January 22nd game against the Toronto Maple Leafs up in Toronto.
I did.
Should it happen, should everything go well, we do have plans to have a viewing party for that game at the Great Oyster Bay Brewery in fabled Oyster Bay. They've been gracious enough to agree to have us there for a viewing party. Now, again, the game needs to happen. And we have to hope that, I guess, nothing protocol, COVID-wise, happens to kind of get in the way.
Yeah.
But we have that date circled. We'd hope that you circle it as well. We'll obviously keep you guys updated. We'll keep you posted with more further details as it goes. But right now, the plan is to have a viewing party for the Islanders versus the Leafs at Oyster Bay Brewing Company on Saturday, January 22nd. So keep it here. Keep it on social media. We'll keep you informed. Should it come to pass, very excited about it. Can't wait to do it. Tony and I did a show a few years ago there. You came down, you hung out with us. That's right. They played the Sharks that night. That was actually the end to their 17-point streak that year. 17-game point streak that year, or 12, 17, whatever it was. But that was the run. No, you know what it was? I think it was the end of the winning streak within. Like, it was like a 10-game winning streak.
They picked up points. They continued to
They
pick up
lost,
points,
I think, in overtime against the Sharks or the shootout, whatever it was, to extend the point streak. But that was the end of the 10-game winning streak. But we had a great time there, lots of fun. Great staff over there, always a great time. So, look, if it happens, we can't wait. Again, we'll keep you guys informed. And that's pretty much all we got on tap because, the NHL just keeps rescheduling games.
Well, apparently snow is also on tap. And I don't mean Garth Snow.
Is that right?
Apparently.
What do we got here? A little weather report on Hockey Night in New York?
T-Boyle saying 4 to 6 inches in Suffolk County.
Oh, no. Well, that's not our problem.
Yeah. Sucks to suck, Suffolk County.
But stay safe,
But also, whatever.
Yeah. So,
whatever.
That was What's on Tap. Brought to you by RJ Daniels, American Bar and Grill.
All right. That was What's on Tap. We did the best we could.
Yeah.
And there's literally no games on tap for the coming week. So we kind of talked about the games already, and we just to wrap up the special teams, the PK is 11th overall, 81.6. So they're still essentially in the top third of the league on the PK. Struggled a little bit lately. I think they were 7th 2 weeks ago, the last time we spoke about it. So, but they're still having success there.
Listen, it's a trade-off. The power play wants to get better. The PK has to get a little worse.
Listen, I will take 17th overall because they were basically 40th overall in a 32-team league not too long ago. That's how bad the power play was. So for them to come this far, and it really has done a 180, and Anders Lee's been a huge part of it. He's doing his job in front of the net. If he's not getting goals, he's getting assists in front there and creating stuff here. So it's great. And again, Dobson. I did it again. Remember I called him Dobson a few weeks ago? We just we're gonna make a T-shirt. Dobson. It's happening. That's fantastic. Oh, Noah Dobson, Kieffer, Bellows also contributing on the power play lately. And I'm sure when Brock Nelson and Oliver Wahlstrom and Ryan Pullock, Belson, when they all come back, I mean, you'd like to think that the power play continues to improve or at least steadies here at a decent pace, which would be nice. So, again, we talked about the games. I'm just trying to look through the notes here to see if there's anything really worth mentioning. We talked about Varlamov. We talked about Dobson and Bellows and Bo getting a couple goals here. Yeah, so we pretty much covered that. So why don't we just move right into Hero of the Week?
All right, let's do it.
All right, folks, want to thank you once again for tuning in to Hockey Night in New York here at twitch.tv/HockeyNightNY and on your favorite podcast providers later on during the week. So, folks, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, the hero of the week.
Customer service is the backbone of any great business, and reliable telecommunication is essential to keeping your client base happy. Introducing Ty Technology, a low-cost, flexible internet phone service founded on the idea that every customer deserves exceptional service while providing simple setup and management and easy integration to clients across the country. Ty Technology will not only create a custom solution tailored to your specific needs, but will partner with you to provide a competitive edge to you and your clients. And if you need support, you won't be routed to an automated call center in another country. You'll get a live representative that had a personal hand in building your account. So Islander fans, if your business is looking for a change from companies like Spectrum, Verizon, or Optimum, Ty Technology is offering 3 free months of service for any of its affordable packages. Just call 516-856-7800. That's 516-856-7800. Or visit them on the web at TieTechnology.com. That's Tie, T-I-E, Technology.com. Ty Technology, the right choice for your internet phone service.
Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear this song, that means it's time for the Hero of the Week, brought to you by the Blue Line Deli and Bagels half-price hero, which this week is the Blue Liner, featuring chicken cutlet, bacon, melted American, Russian dressing on a toasted garlic hero. Get it for half price all week starting tomorrow. That is Monday through next week, where we will announce a brand new half-off hero. So stop on in, mention Hockey Night in New York, and get half off the Blue Liner. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Christian, why don't you tell us who your hero of the week is?
Well, my hero of the week is a man.
It's a man. Okay, great start.
Yeah. Some call him Noah Dobson.
Others
call him Nobson. But it is Noah Dobson.
There he is.
First career NHL overtime game winner for him the other day against the Edmonton Oilers. And you just look at the way he's played over the last couple weeks. I mean, his game has come leaps and bounds from where it was even earlier in the season. I think that he's only gotten better, and it couldn't come at a better time for the Islanders. And it's part of why I think I do have more optimism now that the Islanders could find a way to get themselves back into a playoff spot, is because you have a guy like Dobson and some of these other young guys too. But specifically in this case, you have someone like Noah Dobson, who the Islanders, let's face it, need him to play a significant role this season, and finally finding that stride, finding that offensive stride in his game. You're seeing him get a little bit, I think, smoother when it comes to moving the puck a bit more, and he's not afraid to shoot.
That's the key for me.
Yeah.
And I noted that before, is that he seems a little more confident just letting the puck go towards the net, where in the past he might have hesitated. And I also noted how kind of guys like Robin Salo and Sebastian Aho were kind of still in that hesitancy. Yeah. Should I shoot? Should I not? Even when they're getting chances on the power play and stuff like that. But it looks like Dobson, or as I like to affectionately now apparently call him, Nobson, he's definitely stepped up his game. And hopefully this is something that becomes consistent, and when you get Pulock back, then all of a sudden you have 3, top-looking defensemen here that can really kind of help, maybe make up for whatever slack we've discussed earlier on in the season as far as the bottom end of the defense goes.
Right.
And you know what? Speaking of that, I think Chara's been better too. For Chara, for what we expect out of him, I think he's improved.
What we expect out of him now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll give you that. I agree. I think he's been more consistent.
Okay, and now it's time for my hero, and that is none other than
Nobson.
No, it's not Nobson. It's not
Mazel.
It's Mazel. No, it's Bellows.
Nice.
It's Kieffer Bellows. Ladies and gentlemen, we talked about him earlier as well. Goal and an assist versus the Buffalo Sabres. Had a power play assist versus the Oilers. And as we also noted, getting a lot more ice time, taking advantage of it, looking a lot better there. Kind of, I suppose, filling the void that Oliver Wahlstrom left when we were singing his praises when he was stepping up. And it seems like Bellows is seizing the moment here. I am very curious to see if Barry Trotz puts his money where his mouth is when Palmieri does get healthy. Is he a guy who maybe sits and waits a few games before he gets back in if Bellows and Wahlstrom happen to be playing up to the level that Barry Trotz expects?
I hope he does. I mean, to be honest.
Good problem to have.
Yeah, well, yes and no. Yes and no.
Sure, I got you.
But no, I think Bellows, if anything, has earned that spot, that right to knock himself out of the lineup. If you're going to put a guy like Kyle Palmieri, and I get it. He has street cred and all that, but I mean, Bellows certainly has, I think, in the last couple of weeks, earned that street cred.
Absolutely. If he's playing well, he's putting up points, he's contributing to wins for this team, why rush Palmieri back? Because it's not like they're desperate to get whatever he was doing prior to his injury. Everybody knows he only has 1 goal. I think he only has 7 points on the season. Obviously, very disappointing so far for this season after the contract that he signed. Now, is he going the way of Andrew Ladd? No, I don't think so. I think this is a guy who is still going to be able to pull himself together and be a contributing force in this team. Obviously, he had struggles when he was first traded to the team. Clearly, that's carried over this regular season as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not ready to, close the book on this guy and say that it's a failed signing or, maybe they got a little too ahead of themselves. And look, when you have guys like Wahlstrom and Bellows picking it up, it kind of softens that blow. And maybe he's able to ease himself back into a more significant role. And look, if they can get him rolling along with those young guys as the season goes and they're fighting for a wild card spot, maybe they get that spot. And then all of a sudden you have a lot of guys who can contribute once again during the playoffs if they get there. So it sucks that he's not playing well now, but I am curious to see how Trotz handles it when he does get healthy.
Yeah, that's going to be the $1 million question, right? Like, that's the guy that everyone has kind of had a marker on for someone they want to see sit, because he hasn't performed, and now Trotz is kind of saying, well, it's a possibility.
Maybe he will.
Maybe he will.
Yeah.
We'll see. No one knows except Barry Trotz.
Yes, correct. So, folks, that was Hero of the Week, brought to you by the Blue Line Deli and Bagels half-price hero. Once again, the Blue Liner with chicken cutlet, bacon, melted American cheese, Russian dressing on a toasted garlic hero. Delicious. Head to Blue Line, mention us, get it for half price.
Ooh.
So, Christian, anything else you want to touch on? Or you want to just fly right in to Questions Brewing?
Let's go into Questions Brewing.
Are you ready? You got your questions ready?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right, folks, it is time for Questions Brewing, brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company and their excellent honey ale. Give it a shot if you haven't already. Delicious. Just another great offering from Oyster Bay Brewing Company. And can't wait to have all their drinks at our disposal January 22nd if we actually get in there for the game. So all good stuff. Questions Brewing. Christian, why don't you start us off here?
T-Boyle 13 question brewing. Who sits when Ryan Pulock returns?
That's a good question. Now, I would say it's probably going to be Robin Salo.
Yeah.
Maybe to the chagrin of all of us. Maybe just to some of us. But he's going to be the first guy. If everybody else is healthy and not on COVID protocol, it's probably going to be Robin Salo. Not sure I agree with that, but that's probably who it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I think it is too. I mean, when you look up and down the Islanders' defensive lineup at any rate, it's not going to be Scott Mayfield. It's not going to be. I mean, Mayfield.
It's not going to be Andy Green.
It's
probably not going to be Chara.
Chara would have been your three guesses, right, of the guys that you would be okay sitting. And of those three, Andy Green, he serves a role, right? I mean, he's a bottom, he's a third line defenseman that, I mean, he plays his part. Maybe he makes a couple of mistakes. I mean, but he's a veteran guy that adds some stability back there. Zdeno Chara, I mean, through the highs and lows of the season for him anyway, Barry Trotz has kept him in the lineup, and he hasn't been someone that Trotz has indicated would come out of the lineup. And Scott Mayfield's a veteran presence there, and from the mistakes that he makes here or there, I mean, he does make a lot of good defensive plays, and he's got a good shot.
Mayfield's not coming out of the line,
right? But of the three names you could think of off the bat, those would be the three names that Islander fans I think would be okay with coming out of the lineup. Mayfield probably being the lead, like right on the fringe of being okay and not okay, because listen, I think Salo has earned the right to stay here and play, but Pulock's got to get back in the lineup, and Barry Trotz seemed, as much as he's given the indication he's willing to move a guy like Palmieri out of the lineup or keep him out of the lineup, and take a guy like Anthony Beauvillier out of the lineup, it doesn't seem like that same willingness applies to the defensive side of the ice.
I guess maybe a more prevalent question would be, what do the pairings look like when Pulock comes back? And I think, as we've talked about, Brian Compton mentioned this when we talked to him about Pulock, is that you see Pelech and Pulock back together, so that essentially probably bumps Mayfield back down to playing with Andy Green, and you probably see
Dobson
and
Chara
and Zdeno Chara, yeah, because that's the pairing that they started with this season, and they're playing together now, so that's probably what it looks like. And I know you and I have both expressed concerns over that because of the lack of speed there. Looking at a pairing between Andy Green Scott Mayfield. But I do still agree with B-Comp when he said you got to put Pelech and Pulock back together.
Oh, I agree with you, too.
Yeah.
As much as there was an openness to see how that played out, and it worked for the time being early on when you separated them and kind of had to mix and match some guys. The long run, it clearly didn't work, right? The defense struggled immensely, and obviously there were other factors to it, but I mean, they struggled immensely when Ryan Pulock and Adam Pelech were separated, and those guys were still playing, good games out there, but I mean, they just there was something that was lost when those two were not together, and it was noticeable throughout the lineup because everyone just seemed off. Even, you look at Pelech and Pulock, and even they seemed a little off when they were out there without each other. And not to say that they were making mistakes, but the comfortability wasn't there.
I guess if you want to play devil's advocate, you can maybe re-question that because now they are having success without that pair together now. So do they mix and match again? Do they try to find a way to even keep Robin Salo in the lineup because they like what they see out of him, puck moving wise, skating wise for sure. I mean, he definitely that's definitely something he can bring to the table that those other three guys you mentioned don't.
Right.
But the thing is, do they trust him enough to sit one of those guys? I wouldn't even say three guys. Mayfield's not coming out of the lineup. It would be either Andy Green or Zdeno Chara, and I guess it would be Chara being the first guy if any of them are coming out. And, maybe there's a case to be made there. And does that maybe that allows you to keep Pelech and Pulock together if Salo stays? If he doesn't, do they feel more inclined to split them up because they've seen some success without having Pulock in the lineup? It's going to be interesting. I guess Noah Dobson almost kind of threw a wrench into that because he's been so successful lately, right? And maybe they can rely more on him and they don't have to put so much pressure on the shoulders of Pelech and Pulock. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do when he does come back.
Yeah, certainly does. We'll go on to the next question. Mike 4652Co. Question brewing. It's amazing what the young guys can do when given a chance. Can Barry Trotz learn new tricks?
Yeah, look, and this is kind of how it seems to always go when injuries or the like force a coach's hand to put a younger guy in the lineup that he doesn't maybe trust yet. And I guess, look, you can kind of see the mentality where it's, look, I know what I'm getting out of this guy, so I'm going to play this guy and hope that he plays the way I think he can or think he should. And he'd rather go with the devil he knows than the devil he doesn't, right? That to use a cliche.
Yeah.
And maybe him, like a lot of other coaches in this league, is a little more guilty of that than maybe other coaches. I'm not sure. I remember that complaint being the same when Jack Capuano was running this team too. Why isn't he playing the kids? Why isn't he playing the kids? So
I think it's a league thing, like an NHL thing.
I'm not so sure it's just a head coach of the New York Islanders thing. I think if it's something that happens around the league. Now, obviously, there's different circumstances where you just have younger teams that are rebuilding, have no choice. But the Islanders used to be that team where they had to play their young guys, where they were bringing up guys like Josh Bailey a little too soon, or playing Nino Niederreiter to reach the cap floor, or whatever the case may be. Where it's flipped now because they're a team that's up towards the cap now. They have veterans, and these coaches have guys that they trust. If anything, I don't know if look, I'm not necessarily on the team of pointing fingers at Barry saying, "See, I told you so."
Right?
Maybe you should have played these guys all along because let's face it, we just talked about this earlier in the show. When Kieffer, Bellows, and Noah Dobson were getting minutes earlier in the season, or even prior to this season, they weren't exactly looking like stormbreakers, right? They needed to grow into these roles. So I know you can make an argument, chicken the egg and whatnot, but, look, we're just starting to see now what these guys can do, and they needed to kind of get there. So would it have behooved Barry Trotz to play those guys, either earlier in the season or maybe even seasons past where, they're trying to pick up points to get into the playoffs or whatever the case may be. So I get where you're coming from. I think, if anything, you just take the positive out of the fact that, hey, these guys, for one reason or another, finally got into the lineup, and they're showing positive signs that, hey, maybe these guys are – we knew Dobson was going to be a keeper, but Kieffer, Bellows –
He was very much on the fence.
Yeah, there was very much a point in time where we were like, okay, this guy probably isn't going to be an Islander in the long term. And now it's like, hey, we might have something here. So, and it happened with Devon Taves too. It took an injury. It took an injury for him to get into the lineup. So maybe it takes a little longer than maybe the fans would like, maybe you guys would like, but at least we're seeing development out of these guys, maybe a little later than you like.
Mike also asking question brewing number 2. Thoughts or impressions on Lane Lambert heading the bench? What did you guys notice?
Look, we talked about this before, and it's one game, And Lane Lambert is carrying out Barry Trotz's plan in that one game. I mean, look, that's not to take anything away from Lambert.
Sounds
but
like you are.
But, I mean, is it really, oh, man, they won that game with Lambert. You know what? Tell Barry to wait until they lose a game. No. Look, he's going to do what Barry Trotz was basically going to do anyway if he was standing behind the bench, So, look, I guess Islander fans are fortunate to have a guy like Lambert. What is with me in combining first and last?
I mean, that's the Lane Lambert.
Lambert's pretty hilarious.
Lane Lambert.
Lane Lambert, yes. So I guess
that's a tough one.
It is a little
tongue
bit
twister.
So
I mean, I think you also don't like
they're
the
fortunate
guy.
to have a guy behind the bench like him that can step in the role. But like honestly, for one game, I don't think much of it. They got the win, which is great, and I'm sure he's a great assistant coach. But like, does it really mean anything one game at Barry Breen now? I don't think so.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think to Sean's point, the plan wasn't going to change much depending on who was behind the bench,
exactly.
right? I mean, a lot of these guys work hand in hand together to create and come up with, and obviously Barry Trotz is the executor of everything, but
yeah. And it's not like Lane was going to turn to Barry, but listen, man, you're not here tonight, so I'm tearing your plans up, and we're doing it my way tonight, all right, pal? It's not really how it's going to work.
Right, yeah. I mean, this is a pretty – I mean, also Barry Trotz has worked with Lane Lambert for how many years now? So, I mean, these guys work pretty closely together and know each other's style pretty well. So, I think for the most part, the style and the game plan was something that was already in their head because they've executed and they've done it for so many years together as coaches that it really wasn't going to change for the most part. I mean, I stand by what I said before. I think Sean genuinely doesn't like Lane Lambert. I won't even get his name right, but
Lambert.
I mean, that's just rude.
Go on.
All righty, T. Boyle, question brewing. Do you see Pulak returning to the lineup after this long break?
Why not? 11 days, maybe. Is he skating?
He's 4 to 6.
Skating on his own,
4 to 6, right?
Well, yeah. Has it been? How long has it been?
It's hard to tell because usually you gauge with the number of games that have been played, and they haven't played games that many. So, I mean, Pulak really has only missed a handful of games, and what could have been a much larger number.
It doesn't sound to me like he's going to be ready by January 13th.
Right? Maybe
definitely close.
February-ish.
Well, that's another half a month. I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll see him later in January, but I don't think he's going to be ready to go for the Devil game. Now, of course, tomorrow there's going to be a report that he's taking line drills. Yeah. Right.
But he actually checks Barry Trotz into the board kind of thing, right?
Right. I don't think he's going to be back.
In a coup set up by Lane Lambert, Sean Hahn, right?
By Lambert?
Yeah.
But I think it's safe to say that Brock Nelson, Oliver Wahlstrom, and Kyle Palmieri will be ready
by that game.
That game. Whether they all get in the lineup or not remains to be seen. Now, we did see with Oliver Wahlstrom that he came off COVID protocol, but they weren't ready to put him back into the lineup yet. So he's pretty much ready to go. I think Brock will be too. So you got those two guys back, but I think it might just be a little bit longer for Pulak. Question
brewing from Mel Armenia 22. The NHL has made it clear by rescheduling games in Canada because no fans there, but not postponing games due to COVID. Do you think this could cause a possible lockout?
Lockout?
Well, so I think the basis of her question is coming from the frustration by, I think, a lot of players by the NHL's decision to pull out of the Olympics, but continue to manipulate the schedule to ensure that games are being played in front of fans and so that there's revenue. Brad Marchand obviously had a very notable quote this past week about his frustration. And as someone who I am very much anti-NHL players going to the Olympics, I don't think it adds any value and to disrupt the season, I think is stupid. But he made a great point in that if you're going to force the player's hand that they had to negotiate this into their collective bargaining agreement, right? And that the players are paying X amount of money for hockey related revenue, all this other sort of financial mumbo jumbo, and they're gonna screw the players basically out of going into the Olympics, something that they wanted to do, but continue to force these games to be played. It's counter, and it doesn't make any sense, and it's not fair to the players, right? I mean, the NHL is doing what's best, not for the game or for the league, but what's best for the owners.
I think everything Brad Marchand said was logistically and rationally sound. Yeah. Everything he said, I agreed with. But this is still a product. And you hate to put it in these terms, but those players going out to China are the NHL's product. And whether you agree with it or not, because, again, I agree with Marchand. Like, yeah, hey, look, don't pay me. I'll go. And if, I can't come back or whatever the case may be, just don't pay me. I get that rationale. But there's no way the league is going to agree to letting them go under these conditions where they can be banished in China for 5 weeks or whatever the case may be. If any of them get sick, get COVID while they're out there, they're not coming back. We don't know when they're coming back.
Right.
And that would be an absolute disaster. I mean, this season is, I don't want to say on the brink, but it's creeping towards the brink of disaster already.
Right.
And to send all those guys to China, and if, God forbid, there's an outbreak while they're out there and they can't come back, you're talking about not only the NHL's product, but their top products, all their best players stranded on the other side of the globe. Disaster. And there's no way the NHL was going to let that happen.
Right, but I mean, then you look at the flip side. The league played a ton of games with substandard lineups, the Islanders especially. You look back, I mean, basically the Bridgeport Islanders played NHL games.
Right, but it wasn't league-wide, and it wasn't for potentially an extremely long, unexpected amount of time. It's more within their control. They're here. They're stateside. They're in North America. And
it was in their control.
It's a 10-day protocol as opposed to question mark, right?
Right, but you still had teams across the league. I mean, I think all 31 teams have been affected by this now at
one point or another. But you're talking about every team in the league simultaneously having all their best players, all their stars. A big part of the reason why people put their butts in the stands to begin with to see these stars play. There's no way the NHL even considered this thought for a second. As right as Marchand may be, as great an argument as he might have,
right.
There's no way they were going to let this happen.
I mean, there was no way they were
under these conditions.
I think at the end of the day, the league was looking for their out with this, and they found it. I agree with you to a large extent, but I also think that I just saw Mellerminia's message too.
Okay.
But at the same time, I mean, there are certain financial constraints that they've put on the players now with all this going on, and which is also unfair.
Well, let's just call it that's what this is all about. Yeah. It's about the money.
No, yeah,
that's it. Sure. And Mel brings up the point of the players and their families and all that. The truth is, that's not what these conversations are about.
Oh, no, for sure.
It's about the money.
For sure.
Yeah, and how it's going to affect the league's bottom line.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, that's no secret.
Right.
And, I don't think anyone's under the impression or the false impression that that's the the league is doing this out of the goodness of their heart, or they're
right.
or they're concerned about
because they didn't want them going before this whole COVID situation.
Right.
They wanted to keep them here, and you know what? Probably a lot of GMs and team owners did too. You look at what happened with John Tavares years ago and how Snow was complaining. I'm just citing the nearest example. Is that I'm sure most teams would prefer their players stay than go because they don't want that season-ending ACL injury happening while they're playing in the Olympics. I mean, that's just how this stuff goes. Again, protecting their products.
Not unless they're getting the money out of it and it was the NHL-run World Cup of Hockey, in which case then send everybody and everyone can break their legs and then the league would be perfectly fine with that. Garrett Bear would be cool. It's fine. Question Bruin. I gotta go back to the page. Question Bruin. I know Barry said about Palmieri. This is for Andremi 13.
Okay.
I know Barry said about Palmieri not necessarily getting back into the lineup. Do you really see that happening? Love how Bellows is playing.
I mean, we covered it just before. I'd love to see Barry put his money where his mouth is, right?
Yeah.
If Bellows continues to play as he's playing, and there's nobody else that you can kind of reasonably say, okay, Palmieri should go in for this guy.
Yeah.
Then yeah, sure, let him sit. There's no if they're winning games and if there's guys that are going out into the ice putting up points, whether it's Bellows, Walsham, Bailey, Bavillier, whoever it might be, let the guy watch in the press box for a few games. Maybe that's what the guy could use coming back from the injury. You know what I mean? Ease him back into practice. Let him watch in the press box if they're winning. If they're not, then he probably comes back sooner than later because if that means somebody else isn't getting it done. So, but yes, do I think it's possible? I do.
All right, I agree. And Jeremy 13 also, I'm going to combine these with MJ Beckman's question.
Okay.
This league-wide question regarding trade deadline. It's going to be a weird one. How does a GM evaluate his team with all these postponements? And MJ Beckman followed that up with, does deadline get moved for that matter? Which I think is a fair question as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, if they find a way, sorry, am I cutting you off there?
No, go ahead.
If they find a way to squeeze a good portion of these missed games into February, I don't think the deadline moves. I think they keep it where it is. Now, if there is a significant amount of games that end up getting lopped kind of onto the tail end of the season, then I think it's something that's to be considered. Now, whether that's something they can consider due to CBA contracts and negotiations, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's something that can shift midseason or not. I don't know if that's locked in place. But it's a very valid question where if they have to throw a lot of games on the back end post-deadline, is that something that they may look at? You'd like to think so. I honestly don't even know if they can.
I think they could. I mean, I think the NHL has shown that it can just about do anything it wants when it comes to rescheduling games, postponing games, moving certain things, certain events. And I don't think there's any sort of CBA requirement to be that's involved there. But at the same time, I don't know if they want to mess with that just because it's such a, it's such a hard thing to read right now. And I think by the time they maybe get a grasp of that situation, it'd be too late to move the trade deadline. Because let's say you're a team that maybe doesn't have a game or doesn't have a ton of games moved. Is that fair that the deadline's moved later? And you don't have that, for if you're a team that, it's just the playing field gets a little murky, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to.
I think a good point is being made in the question where, does it become more difficult to evaluate what you're going to do? Yes, of course.
100%.
Because, look at the Islanders, right? Because if they get more games played and there's a certain amount of points out, that gives them a much clearer picture of okay, we can kind of sell some guys off to maybe recoup some assets here. We'll regroup in the summer and get ready for next year, right? But the less games that they play and the closer the trade deadline comes, you have that other side of it where it's like, well, look, we still have another 20 points we can make up here with the 10 games that need to be rescheduled. So maybe we hang on to what we have so we can try to still give a go at this, and which is, I think, what they would be more inclined to do. Now, maybe they don't add because it's still a tricky situation because it's like, we have another 10 games to make up. Do we want to give up assets to bring somebody in only to fall on our faces? So I feel like with the way things are going, and I don't have a clue what goes on in the mind of Lou Lamoriello, but just from my point of view, I feel like the way things are going, maybe that makes the Islanders a little less inclined to make any sort of moves leading up to the deadline, just with those thoughts in mind. Now, if they go on a 5-game losing streak or something like that between now and then, it makes it a lot easier. But if they stay in this, hey, we're 8 points back, but we got 50 games left. 50 games is plenty of games to make up 8 points on a team, So I think it's kind of just wait and see right now.
Yeah, I think as far as the evaluation goes, it makes it extremely hard.
Yeah.
There's no cohesion. You talk about guys coming in, too, and you're looking at a very weird stretch of the season, too. I think general managers would probably be a little more hesitant to make some of these moves.
Right.
Because they just don't know what's around the corner, especially when it comes to the Islanders. They have a very specific problem when it comes to additions late in the season, and that is those guys just tend to kind of disappear during the regular season. They turn it on in the playoffs, but they tend to disappear a little bit in those regular season moments, and it takes them a little bit of time. So is that something you want to mess with too if you're still in the playoff hunt near the Islanders? I don't know. It's a great question that, really, to answer the second part, I don't think they moved the trade deadline. To answer the first part, it makes it extremely tough to, especially if you're a team like the Islanders or one of those bubble playoff teams that are fighting for a playoff spot. It makes it tough to really evaluate where you're going to be and how the right player may or may not impact your team going forward.
Not only that, but are you going to be able to get 32 teams on board with that too?
Oh yeah,
because some teams might be like, yeah, give us more time, but other teams might be like, no, you keep that right where it is.
Right.
So I agree with you 100%. I don't think it moves.
Yeah, I think it would just at the end of the day just be too chaotic for any, and there's enough chaos going on. So
yes,
the league is
plenty
trying
of
to
chaos.
figure a ton of other things out. I could only imagine them trying to figure out how to move the trade deadline.
Yeah, I don't
in a cohesive manner because they try it and they mess it up.
Yeah, you got any more for us?
That's it.
That's it for Questions Brewing. Well, folks, awesome stuff. Want to thank you guys. Love the Questions Brewing segment. You guys do a great job. Really appreciate the questions. Great stuff tonight. Happy to do it. Brought to you by Oyster Bay Brewing Company.
Yeah.
And their delicious honey ale.
Yeah.
So, folks, I think that's it. I think we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank you for joining us for another late edition of Hockey Night in New York. Sorry we couldn't be with you guys last week, but these guys got to play some games. Now, we know they're not going to play this week, but it looks like we're going to be back next week anyway. We're going to talk to you. We're going to have a show.
Yeah.
But huge thanks to Ethan Sears for joining us tonight from the New York Post. Great stuff from him. And again, huge thanks to you guys for joining us here live at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, on a school night. Really appreciate all you guys listening on your favorite podcast providers. And a huge thanks goes out to our sponsors, starting with RJ Daniels American Bar and Grill, located at 279A Sunrise Highway in Rockville Center. The best place to catch the Isles when you can't make it to the game. And don't just go for the Isles. They have live music, comedy nights, trivia, a late night bar scene. They have it all. Huge thanks to Blue Line Deli and Bagels, located at 719 West Jericho Turnpike in Huntington, an official partner of the New York Islanders and the greatest deli around. Don't forget to check out their new location in East Islip, and of course, at the UBS Arena. Check out the menu at BlueLineDeli.com for their great selections and hockey-themed heroes. And a big thanks to Ty Technology, a voice-over IP company providing phone services for businesses across the country. Check them out at TyTechnology.com for all your telecom needs, or give them a call at 516-856-7800 and get 3 free months of service. And of course, a huge thanks to Oyster Bay Brewing Company, located at 36 Audrey Avenue in Oyster Bay. You can order their great beers and merchandise at oysterbaybrewing.com for curbside pickup, local delivery, or shipping anywhere in New York. And you can get 15% off with coupon code HNINY. Check it out. Big thanks to everybody once again. And if you enjoy the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. Tell your friends, spread the word. Follow Christian at C_Arnold01 on Twitter. Follow myself at Shawnee Hockey. Follow the show at Hockey Night NY on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. For Christian Arnold, my name is Sean Cuthbert. We've been Hockey Night in New York. We'll see you next week.
What timing?
What timing, right? Have a great night, everybody. Bye. That was creepy.